Hey guys, Dylan Allen here from Allen Endurance Coaching. Today, we're continuing our training gear series, talking about different training intensities and what we get out of them and when to use them. Today, we're talking about intervals. Typically, if we're doing any kind of workout where we're doing some kind of work with some amount of rest or recovery, we call it an interval workout, right? That's not the same as interval pace or interval effort. And so I wish I had a better term for it. I haven't really found a good one though. But what we're doing at interval pace, what it is at 95 to 100% maximal effort, and we're working on our VO2 max. Like that's the primary goal. And the typically recommended kind of work to rest ratio when we're doing this is a 1-to-1 ratio. So you're going to be working for somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes, depending on who you are, on each bout. And then you're going to get the same amount of time that you spent working. We're going to try to get that amount of time of rest. And you can do it with shorter rest, but only if you're doing shorter intervals normally. Or if you are like not a well-balanced athlete and you recover super fast, or your maximal heart rate isn't as high, or like there are caveats to it. But the goal of an interval workout is to spend as much time as possible at your VO2 max, right? Like kind of like at maximal effort. And so if you're running too fast, you're working too anaerobically, and you're doing repeats, or you're not taking enough recovery or anything like that, what's going to end up happening is you're not going to be able to work hard enough to be able to demand enough oxygen to really stress that system. And so you may get in a couple of reps and then not be able to do more at the right intensity. You could do them, but you're not going to get a ton out of them. And so it is useful when you're doing intervals to make sure you're actually targeting the right effort level, and you're not doing essentially full-on sprints. We do want to be pushing on these ones, not freewheeling, because it's when we're pushing that we're generating, we're working on that aerobic power. And so if we get too deep in the anaerobic hole, we'll have to be dealing with acidosis and all that kind of stuff, which is going to prevent being able to keep hitting that maximal aerobic power output as the workout goes on. And the first couple reps, you may not get a ton of time at that 95 to 100% of your maximal heart rate, and that's okay. Because the heart rate is going to go up and then it's going to come down during the recovery, and then it's going to go up again and then come down during recovery. But over the first couple reps, like the low on the recovery is going to keep going up, right? Until we kind of hit a nice equilibrium where we're spending a couple minutes at 95 to 100% of maximal heart rate, and then we're recovering. It comes down just a little bit. That way we can flush the metabolic waste, get it out of the way, so we're primed and ready for the next interval. If you're really a true endurance athlete, like you're racing long races that last an hour or more, most of us don't need to spend a ton of time doing it. It is good for building mental toughness because it's really uncomfortable, and so you can use them as a way to get comfortable being uncomfortable, which is useful in the tail end of a race, right? But even if you're running a 5K, that last mile is really uncomfortable. You're running that whole race at interval pace, hopefully. So it's rough. And so being able to build the mental toughness to deal with it and be like, yeah, this is familiar. I can handle it. I can work in this state is an important part of training for the shorter, faster races and for the tail end of those longer ones. So you can kind of work on that psychological toughness a little bit doing interval workouts too. But from a physiological standpoint, what we're working on is building that VO2 max. And as we've been hearing about since the 60s, that VO2 max is like the metric that everyone worries about. It's like the prime predictor of endurance fitness. But I personally have the opinion that finish times in races is the best predictor of endurance fitness. Um, but you can't argue with the results. But from a physiological perspective, it is really important for competitive racing. Um, Now, once we get to the longer events like half marathon, marathon, half Ironman, or even in an Olympic distance triathlon, uh, being able to tap into that higher power output helps. It makes us more aerobically efficient at the lower gears that we're utilizing the majority of the race. So it is important to work in. It's probably not the most important bit for most of us, though. It's really useful when we're kind of in the sharpening period of a training block where we have a target race, or if we have a race season per se, instead of just like continual development kind of training, then we're going to want some of that interval work in the sharpening phase. It's going to help us buffer our blood pH. It's going to help increase our VO2 max. We spend a lot of time working on increasing our potential aerobic capacity. The VO2 max work is what helps us get closer to that potential, right? But again, it is physically taxing. It will beat you up. One of the things we learned the hard way back in the 60s and 70s was if you can get really fast doing nothing but interval work, and then you will wake up one day and not be able to get out of bed because your body is destroyed. And if the most important part of endurance training is consistency, um, being able to get your workout in tomorrow is a high priority, right? So it's a little bit different if you're like a competitive athlete with discrete seasons and you time it just right so you can be in peak fitness using interval training right at the championship races, and then you have like time off. But most of us don't live in that world. Most of us are, mere mortals that race on weekends and have 9 to 5 jobs and families and kids and that kind of stuff. And so we're always looking to be continuously developing, right? So it is useful. It can make you tougher, but don't overdo it. Probably shouldn't be more than, I don't care who you are. You don't need to be doing more than 5 or 6 miles of interval work on any given day. I don't care if you're a world-class athlete. But the rest of us, if that's what the world-class athletes are doing, the rest of us have no business doing that volume of high-intensity work because our total training volume isn't that high. Most of us probably want to stick somewhere between 5 and 8% of our total weekly volume doing interval work when we're doing it. Note, that's when we are doing it. That doesn't mean we need to do it all the time. How much of it you need to do is going to vary depending on what your race of choice is and what you're targeting, what kind of training block you're doing. There are lots of ins and outs and hows and whys to use it. But it's good to kind of dip your toe in it every now and again just to stay comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because threshold work doesn't really quite make you uncomfortable enough. And repeat work, the really high speed stuff, also really doesn't quite, it's not the same kind of uncomfortable that we experience on race day. And so that doing some interval work can get you there. That way you don't forget what it's like. So how often do you do intervals? So do you do them, if we're talking 3 to 5 minutes, we're talking 800 meters to maybe mile repeats intervals for folks, for most of us. So how often are you incorporating those into your training plan? How do you do them once a week? Do you do them once a month? Do you do them just when you're kind of sharpening up for a race? How do you utilize them? Till next time, train smart.